Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. You're listening to Creative Status. This is a podcast about using your creativity to improve your life and to get to a place where you feel real and you're doing things that you actually care about. We look at the things that are blocking you from expressing yourself in the world, how you got in that place, that state in the first place, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Today, we're going to be listening to an interview between me and Felipe Zamana. He's an author who has just released a book called Taking Creativity Seriously. I thought that would be a really interesting starting point for a conversation about the kind of stuff that this podcast focuses on, because a lot of people in the world seem to think that creativity is just about painting pretty pictures or taking photographs or whatever it is. Of course, they're all expressions of what it means to be creative, but a lot of the time we forget that creativity is actually an attitude, and that if we have that attitude and we allow the creativity to take us where we need to go, then we become a lot better and stronger in ourselves, and it allows us to be a lot better and stronger in the world. Anyway, that's a rant, but I really hope you enjoy this interview. There's some really good insights in here, especially some stuff that I've been thinking about and reflecting on in my own life, about questions and curiosity and how we can kind of use questions to open things up, even if they're just very simple questions, so that we can unblock ourselves from the patterns that are holding us back and to start embracing something in life that's a lot more real. I'm not going to rant too much more, but if you like this interview, then please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it. If you can leave a review, if you're so inclined, on Apple podcasts or somewhere like that, that would be totally cool. You can also leave a voice message if you want to be featured in the podcast, even if it's just for a short amount of time. Anyway, that's enough from me. Here's the interview, and I really hope you get some value from this. Thank you so much. Oh, hi there, Philippe. Thank you for joining me today on this podcast, Creative Status. You have just written a book about creativity. I don't know if you want to start by introducing yourself and telling the audience what that book's all about, who you are, and that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation for being here today. My name is Felipe Zamana. I'm originally from Brazil, but I live in Portugal now. And soon I will do my PhD in France. It's good, amazing news for me. And I wrote this book, like you said, the name is Taking Creativity Seriously. Why your ideas is more about us than about you. Because creativity have social aspect, very important for development. And I think we not grasped this idea in mainstream yet. So I think we
So
can.
that's the main topic of the book is the little byline that you just said, that you just
Exactly,
shared.
exactly.
So it's not about you, it's about us. So can you explain then, just to get us going, why there is a misconception around creativity that it's just a personal thing? It's just about our individual expression, and that seems to be the extent of it.
Yeah. Well, mainly we have two big issues about creativity that it's mainstream today. One, it's kind of obvious because it's the history of creativity tells us why we see creativity like this today. For example, in the 50s and 60s, with the Cold War and things like that, uh, scientists start to study creativity in an individual aspect to boost our morale, or just how to get better ideas to, well, prevent a world war.
Yeah.
So they are always too focused on this individual aspect, how can develop the individual to have better ideas. And a lot of other things, like in the 80s we have the boom of the creative economy, or the start of creative economy, not with that name, but the first steps. And we see like a lot of consultants selling this idea of creativity as an individual aspect or an individual trait. So this is the first part. And the second one is because it's easy to sell for a person than to sell for a group. So we perpetuate this idea, this image of creativity nowadays because of that. So what I propose here is to change this view for a more social aspect of creativity and how this is way more important than just our individual aspects.
Okay. So do we still need the individual aspect to some extent though? Because in my view, the way that we can become more creative in our lives is to figure out our own emotional stuff, to figure out who we are, figure out what we really want, and then use our creativity as a kind of vessel for pushing through all that stuff and then moving forward in life. Eventually, to move forward in life, that's when we have to kind of reach out to other people and share something of value with the rest of the world. So is that what you mean by the social side of things, or is there more to it than just that?
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that individual aspect is not important. They
Mm.
are definitely
Yeah.
are,
Mm.
but I think we are seeing creativity backwards. So we starting with individual and then we go into the social. But
Mm.
what I'm proposing it's the other way around. So we start seeing the social settings we have, our environment, not just nature, but also nature, but not just, but the environments we work in, we learn in, and then understand how these environments influence our perspectives, our ideas,
Mm.
or connections with other people, and then we try to transform this and like channel this these forces around us to create our own creativity, our personal creativity. So it's starting on the social, ending in the individual, not the other way around like we used to do normally.
Yeah. So I think I agree with you completely. There's a misconception that creativity is just about coming up with some ideas, random ideas in some cases from random places, and then we put them into some kind of a final product. So it might be a book, it might be a movie, a painting, whatever it is. The misconception is that when you do that, you create those kind of things, it's just you and the final product. But actually, there's so much other stuff that comes into it. There's your relationship with the world at large. There's just random things you've picked up as you've gone through life. There's things that might happen to you. There's things going on in the news. All this stuff going on outside of you affects what you're going to express within a given moment in time and space. And so, is it about understanding that and using that to create something better or more real?
Exactly. And we have a lot of studies that say, for example, that when you study abroad, not just living in another country, but actually embracing this different culture can boost significant, meaningfully your creativity. So be inside different settings, cultural settings, social settings, can boost your creativity because give you another perspective of different things that you take for granted. For
Mm,
example, I remember clearly when I live in Brazil and I ask myself why we are a third world uh, scale, why we are in the third world scale, because for what I see, what I know, we are not that bad, you know. And when I travel to Europe and start living here, then okay, I know now because I see that things function, normal things like transportation, health, education, things that are kind of normal for everyone, but how it works completely different here than in Brazil. So then I know what can be different. So uh,
mm.
grasping these different ways of doing things, it's enough to give you a head start for developing your creativity.
Yeah. Would you say that in that example that you gave, was it your so you went to Europe and you saw all these different systems or the way that the systems were implemented differently? Was it your conceptual understanding that allowed you to become more creative, or was it the experiential understanding, or was it some kind of cocktail of the two and your relationship to the way that you had to process that knowledge and the learning?
Well, to be honest, what I really think it's the most different thing, it's how people think.
Mm.
So the way people think in Brazil, I'm not saying that is better or worse, just different.
Yep.
But the way people think in Brazil is different from the way normally Europeans think. I'm not generalizing here, like everybody thinks exactly the same. Not is not
Yeah.
the case, but in comparison with Brazil, it's different.
Mm.
And like I said, the same thing is education, health, transportation. That it's normal for every, I believe, every country. But how it's possible to be different? Because people think different about that things.
Mm.
So this
Mm.
is the most interesting for me. And if you go, we are saying about the West, but if you go to the East, for example, India, China, Japan, it's completely different, even from Europe and Brazil. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not, it's just a few miles away, but it's people think in another way and solve problems and have different ideas because they are inside a different culture. This is amazing for me.
Yeah, I think you need that kind of that cultural diversity, I guess, or those experience of different ways of embodying the same systems, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
You need to understand that so that you can get a better, bigger picture overall and understand the core problem that is that has been solved in those particular instances. What is it though? Do you think that leads to different cultures thinking about the same problem in different ways? Is
I think most of it it's their background. So the culture don't come from thin air, from ether.
mm,
So it's a whole society that evolves from different challenges they face back
yeah,
in their past. So this is one thing that I probably means a lot for this different thinking, but also the education. I think everything starts and ends with education. So the way we learn changes everything,
mm,
even the way we work. For example, imagine that in standard tests we are used to face every day, for example, and if you don't know something, it's probable that you once in your life you cheat. You have like a piece of paper in your pocket to check the answers, and it's the same kind of behavior you can find in companies because we learn that. We
mm,
learn that if you don't know or if you are in trouble, you don't have enough time to study, you have to cheat because you have to prove something for someone that you are capable or you are knowing what you're doing.
mm,
And this is in the education settings, but in a company you see a lot of people doing the same behavior. If they don't know, they cheat, they cut corners, they find shortcuts, and then we ask people to be different in the workplace, but we
mm.
learn that in school. So learning is the foundation of everything for me, even for
Yeah.
creativity, even for
Okay.
creativity.
Okay. So can I throw a curveball out there? Do you think learning can also block our creativity? Because
Definitely,
because
definitely.
one thing that I believe as I look at the world and I help people in my coaching practice, a lot of the time they have been educated or conditioned by the world to block their creativity, to block their ability to solve problems in a real way because they become too attached to their thinking. They become too attached to certain assumptions about who they are, what the world is, how reality works. And because of that, they believe in some cases that they're not creative at all, or they find it really hard to express their creativity. So what can we do in those kind of cases to take creativity more seriously in the kind of way you're talking about?
Well, education have a lot of problems and challenges, and as a professor, I can say that because normally professors are overwhelmed with work. So it's
Mm,
not just get inside the class and teach for 1 hour and then it's done. No, you have a lot of papers to fill and to tests to check and prepare the next classes. So it's a lot of work for just one person. And we just think that teachers have that 1 hour in the class of work. And it's a lot of work outside the class we don't consider. So I'm not saying that the teachers or professors are lazy or anything. They have a real challenge in their hands,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
future of all that people inside the class, it's on their hands. So it's a huge responsibility. But for example, as you say about blocking creativity, I think it's just a way of we learn how to think creatively, because for example, normally these standard tests, you have like one right answer and that's it. So
Yep.
we get used to think about what is the right answer. So we first believe that first that's already have an answer. So we don't face challenges or problems that nobody knows how to solve. It's someone knows the answer, and just one answer it's correct, the rest is wrong. So we don't have this kind of thinking of possibilities, of testing, of try and error. So this is a classic school, classic learning environment for all of us. And one thing that teachers can do, that it's very simple, because it's, I know it's hard to change, and it's a system well established, so it's even harder to change. But imagine if you are a teacher or a professor, the one thing you can do right now, it's instead of asking a close question, try to do open-ended questions. So, for example, I heard the podcast of Professor David Cropley recently, and he gave this example. I think it's nice. So instead of you asking what year started the World War II, you can ask what happened in the situations back then to start the war. So you have a lot of things that happen to start the war. It's not just one thing alone. So it's not just the assassination of the prince or whatever. I don't recall, but the guy.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not
Franz
just the
Ferdinand. Yeah.
yeah. It's not just the assassination of this guy. It's a lot of other things happening the same moment that led to the World War II. But when I ask what year start World War II, you have just one answer, and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So try to make an open-ended question. This is a way to start, and you start to train your students to think broadly, to think openly, and consequentially creatively.
That's amazing. I think that's a good technique to kind of try and cultivate in our own lives, because that example you've just given, it shows that actually, if we're not careful, knowledge, conceptual knowledge, can close us down and stop us from embracing our creativity, because it causes us to become too attached to certainty, but also too attached to specific interpretations, and to treat those interpretations as been completely certain, when actually, if you dig into it and you dig into reality and you dig into life, there's often a lot of variation that you can kind of tune into, or a lot of chaos that will actually allow you to be more creative and more real and to keep growing in life. That was a very long-winded way of saying it, but ultimately, if you ask an open question, you're bringing in more of the experiential stuff. It's not just about concepts and ideas, it's about something a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I like to say that we need to learn how to make good questions, make better questions, because I notice in my teaching that my students don't know even how to research, and we have Google nowadays, but Google only answer what you ask for. So if you don't know how to ask, what to ask, Google it's useless basically,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you don't know what to ask. You don't know what to type there in the search box to know what you need to know. And one thing that I think is very important, it's curiosity. People are not curious enough.
Yeah, yeah,
They just passive consuming content. So they are not in the control of their what they are learning, because they are not curious about things or
yeah,
anything,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, 100%. Just
Yeah,
to go back a little bit, what you've just said about asking good questions is probably one of the most important things that you can do in life, in my opinion. One of the main reasons I think people get stuck is because they're not asking themselves questions about themselves. You know, what do I really value? What do I really want from life? Where do I really want to go? What kind of relationships do I want? All these questions, if they're framed properly, open you up and take you out of the old ways of thinking that are holding you back. And if you're curious in the way that you say, well, you're going to keep moving forward and you're going to keep growing. So, is it fair to say now that without questions, there can be no creativity at all? Because without the questions to get you started, you're not going to learn anything and you're just going to think that you've got it all figured out and you don't need to create anything new and you're going to become stuck.
yeah. I have like a map of creativity in that sense, that everything starts with curiosity.
Yeah.
Curiosity led you to learning. Learning led you to change, and to
Yep.
change you learn, then you arrive at creativity, because without change there's no creativity. But to find change, to do things differently, you need curiosity and you need learning.
Yeah, that's an amazing process, and I think it's 100% true. Like, if you want to make the most out of life and you want to use your creativity to do that, which is what this podcast is about, you need to ask questions and you need to make sure that you keep learning. If you don't keep learning, then you're going to stagnate. But the sweet spot is to make sure that you're learning in a way that is authentic and that you have some kind of strategy behind it. So this little process that you just shared, which I love, curiosity, learning, change, creativity. How can people use that in their lives in a strategic or active way? So they're not just letting change happen. They're not just being creative for the sake of painting a pretty picture or for the sake of their own ego stuff, just expressing what they think they already know. How can they use that process to actually grow as people and then to kind of contribute or to express something in the world that is going to allow the world to be better, in terms of the stuff you were talking about at the start about being more serious about things?
Yeah, one thing that I think it's interesting to think about. Normally, we live for the actually make a change or take action when something is bad in your life. You
Yeah.
are uncomfortable with something, but remember, we don't need to wait things to get bad to make something about it. For
Mm.
example, if I like a very simple example, the nowadays is not a great example, but whatever. If you go to your work, the streets you go through, the ways you make the from your house to your work, it's
Yeah.
always the same normally, because we get used to it, don't even think about it. But what if there is a better way, a fastest way, or a
Mm.
more beautiful way to go from your house to your work? So you have to try things. It's not, you won't lose anything of changing that. Or for example, the way you organize your clothes in the wardrobe is not
Mm.
wrong, is not a problem you
Mm.
need to solve. It's just, what if there is a better way, fastest way, or just different, just to change a little bit, you
Mm.
can do. So you try to ask what if about things you normally do, and see what happens. It's, I
Yeah.
think it's the first step is just to start thinking that creative way to about normal things that you don't have the risk of changing. Because if you change, nothing happens, because it's your wardrobe, it's just another, a different path from your house to your work, for example. So there are no risks involved. So if you change that,
Wow.
nothing will happen, no repercussions. Or
Yeah.
you can discover a good way of doing things.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it starts with what if, and actually that question, what if, it could change your whole life. The thing is,
Yeah,
a lot of the time with creativity, there is a risk, or people feel like there is a risk. So this technique you just shared with us is actually a great testing ground if you're if you're a very anal person, perhaps, or you're just too rigid, or you're a control freak, or you're stuck in a rut, you can start by just saying what if about your routine and mixing things up a little bit. Different diet, different route to work, different way of folding up your clothes, whatever it is. You can start to cultivate this creative curiosity you're talking about with no risk whatsoever. But then maybe if that emboldens you, you can move on to kind of bigger things and take, I don't know, creative risks with your career or creative risks with your relationship or whatever it is.
yeah. I'm reading a book about from Blair Enns. I'm not sure if it's pronounced like this, but the book it's called Pricing Creativity. And in the book, the author talk about how to price or how to build like what they call creative firms, but it's about design, publicity, advertising, marketing, this kind of firms.
Yeah, yeah.
But one
Actually, I
thing,
read that book. It's really good.
yes. So one thing he said, and I think it's fantastic. What you want to give to your client, it's risk reduction or risk mitigation. But this idea led me to think about creativity as a whole, not just
Mm,
as a firm or a specific area. But why people with great ideas like Einstein, Picasso, or Tesla, or this kind of people are so recognized and praised for their ideas. And I think that because of risk, so
yeah.
they took bold moves to
Mm,
become like creative genius, like people used to call.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
about risk. So I think risk it's a very important element of creativity because if you have low risk, normally, I'm not saying this is a rule that
Mm,
uh, it's about everything. No, it's just one way of thinking, just a reflection here. But risk, if you have low risk, the chance of having a
mm,
recognized idea or product or service or whatever, it's
mm,
low. But you
yeah.
have right risks, you can also have right prices.
Yeah. I think it applies in business and in life because
Yeah,
it ultimately it applies everywhere because creativity, it does come with a risk because even though it's creative, it's also destructive in some ways. It's destructive to our ideas about ourselves or whatever ideas we have about the creative project before we set off on the creative journey. So, like you just said, it's creativity is high risk, high reward, low risk, low reward. If you're writing a book, for example, and say it's within a certain genre, so you're writing a horror book, if you take low risk and you just completely stick to the genre conventions, then the reward is going to be low probably because you're just writing the same old crap that's been written a million times before.
yeah,
If you take a higher risk and you introduce something new or you mix conventions or you do something that's never been done before or you put your own personal stuff into it, your emotional stuff that's just your story, whatever, that nobody else can put in there, well, there's more of a risk there, and you're at least increasing the chance of getting a higher reward. If the reward is just having people respond to it a bit better, creativity and chaos, I think, are inherently linked. And the reason that a lot of people try to hide behind their ideas and to control everything and to act as though they've already got it figured out and to avoid the sense of curiosity that we all need is because chaos triggers their underlying emotional stuff. Do you think that's true? That there's a link between chaos and creativity, and that actually we need to actually become more familiar with ourselves in order to be able to face it and go through this process with the high risk, high reward mindset?
yeah. Chaos have everything to do with creativity because if you think that way, uh, creativity is kind of a
Mm,
filter that you put chaos inside and then
Yeah.
become something not chaotic, or at least what I forgot his name, but he is a former founder of Visa. He wrote a book about chaotic organizations, and I like this concept of chaotic because it's a mix of chaos and order.
Yeah.
It's not
Wow.
just pure control in
Yeah.
organization, but also not completely chaos, but it's the mix of both. So you have freedom
Wow.
there, but you
Mm.
also have some minor rules that help organize everything. So nature is kind of like this. You have like it's not chaotic, but you have some rules that
Mm.
organize the ecosystem. So I
Mm.
think this is very interesting. And like we said about risk, the risk is not only in your idea, your process, in your product, your service, your creative outcome somehow. The risk is also in your relations
Yeah.
because imagine, for example, Van Gogh, the painter.
Mm.
Right now, today, he was a creative genius, but back then he was
Mm.
crazy
Yeah.
because he failed to convince people to connect with people to see value in his work. So he was crazy.
Mm.
Today he is praised and as a major painter. So this is a very important thing in creativity, the connection with others. Because if you have a great idea but you fail to connect with other people, to
Mm.
find people out there who see value in your idea, so it's your idea, it's useless, it's worth it.
Yeah, 100%. This comes back to your original point, which is that creativity is not just a personal thing; it's a social thing as well.
Yeah,
And I think that, like, this is something I see all the time with like my clients and stuff like that. A lot of the time when they start off with a business idea or a creative project idea, it's ultimately about what they want for themselves. They want a certain thing to be valued by their audience, whatever it might be. So, for example, maybe they have a certain idea for like a video or something to promote their business, but the video is done in an aesthetic that they really want to be popular because it appeals to their ego ultimately. And then when they put it out there and nothing happens, they're surprised. But actually, you need to find the fine line between what you want and what you value as a creative, and what the marketplace or what your audience or the world at large actually values as well. Because if you're just doing it for yourself, well, nothing's going to happen with it. It's low risk in the language you used a few minutes ago.
exactly, exactly. So the risk is not only inside you, but out there too. So you
Yeah.
have the risk of what they call it, ostracization. So it's you'll be a part of your group or of your society, and we have to remember that
Ah.
human beings are social beings. So without others, we fail to live, to survive, because we
Mm.
need to be in groups, not just in a physical sense, but in emotional, in a cognitive sense. We need
Mm.
others always.
Mm. Mm.
So we can say, "Oh, I don't need anyone. I'm better off myself." Yeah, could be true, but will be harder for you to develop other aspect of your life because you refuse to connect with other people.
Yeah.
So you don't need to connect with everyone. It will be exhausting for us, but
Mm.
we need to connect with the right people. And this is the interesting thing too, because
Mm.
we can have a great idea, but if we connect with the wrong people, the wrong group, with people with don't that don't see value in you and your ideas and your contributions, it's the same thing. So you have to find people who share not this the same mindset, but who think alike, but in a
Mm.
good sense. People who are willing to help you develop. They can, for example, don't see that your idea is really great, but push you further, motivate you to keep going, to keep thinking, keep developing. So
Mm.
it's a group that receives you and offers you a safe space to be wrong. So
Yes.
this is a good thing too.
Yeah. It's about finding a tribe of people that you can be real around, and they will allow you to grow more real in their presence, but also to support them to grow real as well. And your creative work, if you aim it at the right people, will be an expression of your journey so far, so to speak, like how you became more real as a result of your curiosity and all that stuff. But it will also help the audience to recognize the journeys that they've been on as well, and to allow them to go through some inner cognitive process of understanding themselves a bit more and putting their own experience in some context where they can keep growing real as well. The question is, though, how do we, as creative people, how do we ensure that our work is going to be of that caliber, that it's going to help other people to grow more real, that it's not just going to be some egotistical, solipsistic kind of, mawkish expression of like our emotions or whatever it is? How do we make sure it's something bigger than just us?
This is a great question because we want things right now. We don't want to wait anything, any
Mm,
second
mm,
to see what work we work our work will provide for us and for other people. And this is a thing I actually explore this idea more in my book. But basically, why we always in a rush to be creative? And it's an important thing because we need time to come up with our best ideas. We need time, and we need
mm,
to keep working. We need
mm,
to be a master in some subject that for us is important,
mm.
and this take time. You can't become a master in 2 weeks or with 3 tips and you become more creative. This is don't exist, and it's what people sell out there. And this make me mad, to be honest,
Yeah, yeah,
because
me
they are,
too.
yeah, because it's impossible to like I really hate tips of creativity because I'm not saying that all useless, but normally they are. Like, for example, oh, you have to listen to more music.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Really?
yeah.
So this is, it's bad. So you need to study, to be curious about things and to experiment
Yeah.
your ideas, to try out your ideas. You're gonna fail eventually, but it's part of the process. But you have to find your own process. This is the first thing.
Mm,
Don't You can start with uh, an already known process. For example, a lot of people in design use the design thinking process. It's not wrong, but with time, you have to develop your own system, your own process, not just using the no process, because this no process, it's good, yeah, it's work, yeah, but it won't work every time and
mm, mm,
for everyone. So you have to find your own process to develop your own creativity. And this involves also keep trying, keep connecting with people, keeping experimenting your ideas. So this is, it's very important. And only with time you can find a way to really contribute with your group or with your society, with your culture, that people see value on it. So
mm.
don't rush. Keep doing, keep working, keep curious about things, and keep exploring. This is the main tip for creativity you can have. So just keep doing, keep
Yeah,
trying, keep
yeah,
studying, keep
yeah,
learning.
yeah. Do you know what? I couldn't agree more. And I, like you, I hate all this stuff that's out there. These magic bullets, these quick fixes that are
Yeah,
supposed to turn you into a creative genius or a business genius or whatever it is. It's just marketing bullshit. The internet is just promulgating everywhere. And I think the reason that that kind of stuff is so popular is because actually, whether it's about living a good life or being good at whatever it is you're trying to be good at in terms of creativity, it involves, like we've said, facing our own chaos, wrestling with reality, and coming to terms with our own weaknesses, pushing through them, seeing where we have blind spots, reaching points where we just don't know what to do because we haven't found a solution to the problem yet, or there is no solution yet. And in that, during those periods where we're facing uncertainty like that and we're riding through the edge of ourselves, it's very difficult. And for that reason, I think this is why a lot of people don't take creativity seriously, and instead they think it's just the easy stuff. It's just the, listening to music like the tips might tell you, or dancing around and getting in your body and then painting a pretty picture that nobody can relate to or that doesn't really mean anything, or just doing something kitsch. Do you know what I mean? The easy kind of
Yeah.
creativity that doesn't involve you looking at yourself and then connecting to others on a deeper level. And it's easier to sell that because actually I don't think many people are interested in buying the reality, because the reality is usually harder, although the risk reward ratio with reality is usually a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's when you're trying to explore things, you become a better listener first of
Mm-hmm.
all,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start to make better questions because you try to question things. You said why is like that? Maybe that there is a reason, and it's a good reason, but the fact that you are starting to question things, it's a good thing because it's getting your own process of questioning things, to not take anything for granted, to stay out of the autopilot we live in, because most people are in autopilot. They just doing what telling
Mm-hmm.
someone tell it to do. So it's good
Mm-hmm.
to some time now and then you question these things. Why I'm doing this? And I asked this question a lot of times. Why I'm doing this? And sometimes I don't know. And when I don't know, I stopped, because if I don't know why I'm doing that thing, why I'm doing,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's
I
no
think,
reason.
yeah, like people a lot of the time are just running through life on autopilot, and it's a false sense of order. But like you said earlier in the conversation, like real creativity is about walking the tightrope between order and chaos. So you're bringing in order to your life with your ideas about what you're going to do next. Reality comes along and it introduces some new chaos, and then you have to tweak things a little more. And it's that constant fine tuning between those two states of order and chaos. And the only thing really that allows us to find that sweet spot is living in this curious, creative way that you're talking about, or that I call growing real, which is ultimately just about working with reality and the chaos and all those things instead of against it or trying to hide it behind ideas or just assumptions or false routines or just going through the motions, like you said, and doing things without knowing why we're doing it. Um, do you think that what you're saying about questions is ultimately about finding a sweet spot kind of way to bring more chaos into our lives? Because as soon as you start asking those questions, why am I doing this? What's this for? What's the point in that? You're actually just bringing or inviting chaos back into your life. And if you approach that with the right attitude, then you can get on that pathway you talked about earlier, where it's about curiosity, learning, change, and creativity.
Yeah, everything we talk until now, it's kind of about the process, creative process, but
Mm,
the goal and the thing that make you keep going, it's meaning. I think meaning it's the key word here,
mm,
because
mm,
even for creativity, when you arrive at some outcome, it need to be meaningful for you and for other people. Because, like we said, if it's meaningful just for you,
mm,
maybe it's not a good thing, because we live in groups in society. But if you can make other people see the meaning, the reason, not a logical reason here, but see value in what you did, your contributions, this is the goal of creativity. And I think creativity have a social responsibility inside because
Mm.
of that, because our creations impact others positively or negatively. So we need to think about what we are creating. It's good for others, and this thinking, this process, leads us to the meaning. So we need a purpose, we need a meaning, uh, create something meaningful for others and
Yeah.
for us, of course. And I think this is what bring order for the chaos out there, because you know, and when I say no, I'm not saying a logical response for what you are doing, like
Mm.
we say here, why I'm doing this. You don't need a logic answer for that. You
Mm.
just, sometimes it's a feeling.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
know, I feel that it's here is the right path for me right now, or for this creation, or for this contribution I want to make. So
Mm.
this answer, not logical answer, but this answer is the meaning why you're doing that. And this is what bringing chaos, order to chaos out there. So we use this chaos as fuel for our creations.
Yeah, I love that, and I think you're right. Like, it's beyond logic a lot of the time, because the logic is, it's just, it's very thinky, it's very cerebral, and reality itself, like I keep saying, like a broken record now, is more experiential. And so you know that if what you're doing is what you're supposed to be doing, or if you're on the right path, if you're in that flow state, if you're growing and moving forward with your purpose. And the way that I see it is, if you do feel like you're aligned with your purpose, i.e., you're just doing something that's aligned with your true values and your true intentions. If you feel that way, then the things you produce stand a higher chance of being meaningful, because they
Yeah,
came from a place that's real. And if it's
exactly.
meaningful, yeah. And so if it's meaningful to you, then it's more likely to mean something to other people, or depending on how deep you have to go into yourself to, bring whatever you created up to the surface, it will not necessarily mean something to other people, or at least not mean the same as it means to you, but it will cause them to ask questions in the way that you're talking about. And as they ask those questions, they're going to get new insights about their own life, and hopefully kind of be able to grow and move forward and get on their own purpose and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, you mentioned the flow state, and imagine you are in the flow state and you stop to think logically. Then it's gone. The flow state is gone. If you have to stop and think logically, or what I'm doing, what is happening, it's gone. You lose
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So logic, it's important, but not all the time.
Yeah. Like a lot of the time, like in my work, I talk about wholeness versus fragmentation. And we haven't really talked about it in any of our previous chats or anything like that. But do you think we could say then that creativity is about moving towards more wholeness inside ourselves? And when we get caught up in fragments, i.e., the things that stop us from moving towards more wholeness or connection to ourselves and other people, like our ideas and assumptions and the routines, thinking we know everything, the kind of things you talked about, the false sense of order. Do you think we can look at it in those terms? So actually, creativity is about moving towards like whole systems almost.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I read in your book about you address this subject, but I'm not
Mm,
sure if it's the same sense you give to it. But I think creativity is about the whole and not
mm,
fragmentation, because I think we fail nowadays to see the whole picture, like
mm,
we
mm,
used to say, because we are so stuck in the details
mm,
that we can't see the whole. And this is a problem, because creativity needs to one aspect of creativity is to see things in a different way and a different perspective. But if you are stuck in the details, we fail to see the connections between apparently distinct subjects.
mm,
So how
mm,
can I see connections between this subject A and the subject B if I'm stuck in the details of the subject A, for
Yes.
example. So I need to step up like a wide range of looking of perspectives, and I
Mm,
start to see connections. For example, I like to read books way outside creativity area,
mm,
and I start to see connections there. Or give me ideas of how can I uh, see creativity in different lenses. So
yeah.
we have to one day to stop a little bit of seeing the things we're used to see and to think about things that we used to think, and give it a chance for different subjects, completely random subjects
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes,
yeah. Yeah.
or completely outside your area, or something completely new for you that you
Mm.
never seen before, never heard before. And but be open, not just why I don't like this thing, this new thing, and
Yeah.
what here I can use for my thinking, my things, my contributions. So it's be
Mm.
open, really open, and not just finding the flaws like normally people do.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like I go to a different restaurant and I don't like this place. I don't like the colors of the towels. I don't like the way they cook food here.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm.
it's not supposed to like everything, but what I can find here that it's interesting. So it's a more positive way of looking
Yeah,
things.
yeah. I love that. Like, I think you're completely right. Like, most people, especially if they're stuck on autopilot in the way that you talked about earlier, they just focused on the things that they want to run away from. So they're constantly looking for problems. They're looking for reasons not to change their lives, not to be curious, not to
Yeah,
mix things up. And actually, because of what we just said about wholeness and fragmentation, you can actually find something real, something that can help you grow, something that can help you be the next version of yourself, absolutely anywhere. If you're open to running towards that instead of just running away from the minor annoyances of life and the things that, the negative things that you can find anywhere. Ultimately, the short version of that, you can find negative things everywhere if you look for them. You can find real or positive things everywhere if you look for them. So you might as well shift into this attitude you're talking about of going out there and mixing things up and letting yourself grow and move with life instead of against it.
yeah, and it's connection. Make a connection here. What we start in this beginning of the podcast is
Mm,
about thinking, the way we think.
mm,
And I even made a poster with this phrase, with this quote. I think once that what can be done rather than why can't be done.
yeah,
And sometimes we're stuck in the why can't be done,
yeah,
what's the problem. Oh, the problem is we don't have resources, we don't have the people enough to make this happen, or I
mm,
don't have time. So it's stuck in the why can't be done,
yeah.
and we
I
need to think why can be done.
Yeah, I heard a similar quote once, or I read it on the internet or something. They said a negative person has a problem for every solution, and I think,
Exactly.
yeah, that's so true. I think about that all the time. So how do we take all this stuff that you've said, and what are some major changes, or even some simple changes actually, that we can make in our lives if we want to be more creative in this real interdependent way that you're talking about?
Well, we can follow that path I mentioned before, starting with being more curious about things, and
Yep.
don't need to anything. I remember when I was younger, I spent weeks, like literally weeks, reading about the statues of the Easter Island. I'm
Wow.
not why. I can't say why I'm so curious about that thing, but I spent weeks reading about it. And one day, not saying that I use this thing, but one
Mhm.
day this information can help me with something. I
Yeah.
don't even see how, see where. So, but be curious about things. The second
Mm.
step and it's a flow thing. Now, if you are curious about things, it's normal that you start to make better questions because you are curious. So you want to know things, and if
Mm,
that question don't give you the answer you are expecting, you make another question and another question and another question, and you learn things that give you more questions to make, more
mm,
possibilities of
mm,
questions to make. So then you start to change things in your life, like we mentioned before, like change the way you organize your clothes in your wardrobe, change the path you make for your house to your work, or to from your house to your mother's house. And these small changes start to make like a click in your head in thinking differently. So you're curious, you make better questions, and you're implementing changes with low
mm,
risk at start, and then you grow as you feel comfortable to more risky things. And I'm
mm.
not saying to risk your life, but risking the sense on social sense of putting your ideas out there and not be afraid to be
Yeah.
rejected, to be criticized, because it's something that you get used to it.
Mm.
And finally, doing these things, you arrive at creativity. So you potentially become more creative if you are curious about things, you make better questions, and you implement these changes.
I feel like I could ask you a million other questions. I think we've opened up so many cans of worms today, and it's made me a lot more curious as a human being. So I think I'm going to, go out there in the world now and ask a ton more questions after this. Have you got any final words that you want to share with us just to wrap this up, or do you want to tell us where we can find you online, where we can buy your book, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm majorly in LinkedIn, so you can find a lot of content there. I share every week some insights or some new ideas I had about creativity, education, leadership, future of work, and future of learning, that subjects I'm passionate about and curious about. And you can also have like a deeper dive in creativity subject in my book. You can find in Amazon. You can find the link in my LinkedIn, for example. It's taking creativity seriously, and I think it's that. So keep curious, and if you have questions, if you pop up new questions in your mind during this podcast, you can find me there and ask whatever you want, and I will be happy to answer whatever I can, or at least poke you to become more curious about that subject.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people are going to want to be poked by you after listening to this, because I think we've said quite a lot of interesting things that are worth following up on. Philippe, I just want to say thank you for coming on here, and maybe I'll get you on again one day if that's okay.
Yeah,
Sometime
definitely.
so we'll follow up and just see where we are at the time. Okay, brilliant. That was awesome. Thank you so much.